Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Tech Tuesday. My name is Vanessa. I'm a communications specialist with ITS, and today we're going to be talking about the DMP tool. Today we have Drew Wright, who's one of our librarians at the Wood Library. He's going to be leading today's discussion, doing a demonstration and answering any questions you might have. We also have Dr. Michele Fortes on, who is also going to be able to answer some of the questions that you might have. We have a lot of people registered today. So just to avoid any background noises, I do have everyone muted, but if you have a question at any point during the session, please feel free to post it in the chat. We'll be stopping every so often to make sure we answer all of your questions, whether it's about DMPTool or about the NIH policy surrounding why you might be here today to answer some of your questions. We also may have Dr. Sarah Ben-Mamar, also from the library, on to help answer questions as well. We're also recording today's session, so after the session's over, later on today, you'll be getting a follow-up email with a link to today's video, so you can go back and refer to it, as well as any links that we talk about today, so that you can go back and refer to it and maybe even share with your colleagues. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Drew. Drew, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Vanessa. And hello, everyone. If we haven't met before, my name is Drew Wright. I'm technically the scholarly communications librarian at the Weil Library. And then I'm also, you've probably gotten angry emails from me about the NIH public access policy. And so I'm helping out on the data management policy sort of side as well. And today, the sort of main goal is just to introduce a tool that we've had for a while, and people have sort of been using it, but it's a very useful tool to help generate NIH compliant data management and sharing plans, especially if this is the first time, putting together a plan like this, and you have some questions about what goes where and how to best fill it out. What is on the screen right now is just a guide, a generic general guide for the NIH data management sharing plan. The URL is just library.weil blah 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 / DMSP. So when I say DMSP, I'm meaning the data management and sharing plan. I'll also occasionally say DMP, probably like the DMP tool, and that's just data management plan. So in practical language, those are the same things that we're talking about here. So I usually try to keep it to DMSP, but occasionally I might slip. So just as a as a heads up. So this is, again, a general guide with the NIH sections that we've started to sort of build out. We will be updating it and are currently updating it as we get feedback from the NIH about the plan. We get feedback from researchers and faculty members that we're working with. So this will be a constantly sort of evolving guide that will hopefully represent the most up-to-date information that we have, both from y'all and from the NIH ICs as we get feedback from what they are talking about. And the goal of this isn't necessarily to discuss the plan in general, although, probably we'll have some questions about that. So if we kind of get through the DMPTool demo, and then if anyone has any DMPTool questions, we can get to those, and then probably the more general questions after that, if that works. So I'm leaving plenty of time for that sort of aspect of this. So just to keep that in mind as we're kind of going through it. Okay. So with that said, we're going to jump over into DMPTool. The URL is dmptool.org. Excuse me. And it is a tool that's the open source tool that's built and maintained by the California Digital Library, which has been working in this space for a long time. DMPTool was very helpful when the NSF originally spun up their data management plans a number of years ago. And a lot of people who use it are focused on the NSF space. And now that the NIH is starting to require these types of tools, a lot of NIH fundees are starting to build their plans in DMPTool as well. So it might be new to the NIH space, but it's been around a long time. It's been well used and tweaked, and it's at a point now where it's pretty easy to use, pretty seamless, intuitive, and it continues to sort of be updated. So what it's not is it's not an official NIH product. So it is a third-party piece of software that updates itself when the NIH updates their policies and when the NSF updates their policies. So it's really up to date with what the NIH wants. It might not be like to the second up to date. So if they change something today, it might not be reflected in DMPTool, today, maybe tomorrow or something like that. So just to sort of temper expectations and things like that. All right, so jumping in, logging in and creating an account with DMPTool is very simple. It's linked into our single sign-on process. So all you have to do is sign in with your Weill Cornell Seaweed email address, and it will automatically send you through the authentication steps that we pretty much use for all other services at the college. And what it bumps you into is just a generic dashboard. So if you've already created plans, I just have a bunch of generic plans, tests that I've made up, and a couple plans from Weill Cornell that have been publicly shared. And speaking of the publicly sharing, before we even get into creating a plan, one of the nice features of DMPTool is that you can actually look at other people's DMPs if they've created it and made it available to be shared. And I'll show you where that sort of function is as we get to it. So not only does it allow you to manage your own and to build your own, but you can also look at other people's NIH plans as well. And as you can imagine, not a ton of NIH plans at the moment. Where can we look for it? So 25 that have been created and that have been made available publicly. So if you are looking for a little bit of inspiration, or you want to look at some other plans that have been publicly created and put out there, you can do so here. And this list will continue to grow as more and more plans get built and shared and kind of multiple grant cycles come and go. We do also have on the main library webpage links to other templates and stuff like that that you might be interested in. So getting right into the create plan. It does ask you a few sort of intro questions. So basic title, if you are doing it for testing, there is an option there, and that sort of hides it from public view, so you don't have to take an extra step to do that. So I'll just say like DMPTool Tech Tuesday. Ooh, typing with people watching. It's not great. Select primary research organization. Weill is going to be automatically populated because you've logged in with a Weill credentials. And then for funding, for this instance, we're just going to say NIH. You can also use this for non-NIH funded work. You can either search for it here, or if it's like a private company, or you just want a kind of a generic template, you can click no funder associated with this plan, and it takes you to our generic Weill Cornell plan, which, surprise, surprise, is basically the NIH template. So it's going to ask you pretty much the same questions, just in a slightly different way. So you're going to answer the same questions one way or the other. So I tend to push people to use the NIH template if you're doing that. So we'll go to create plan, maybe. And then we get into the actual meat and potatoes. So we're first starting off with just generic project details. You can fill out as much of this information as you want. You can also use it to keep track of your decisions, if that's something that you're curious in. Really, the main thing you want to pay attention to on this details page is selecting this guidance. So we've made our own guidance at Weill Cornell, which is essentially link outs to pages on the library guide. And there's also guidance from DMPTool, which is more generic, general guidance. There's guidance from the NIH, which is more generic, general guidance. And there's also guidance from Cornell, because we share a license with Cornell Ithaca, and they have their own sort of guidance as well. It's similar but different. Their guidance is more geared towards NSF fundies, but it might be useful if you're curious to see what that looks like to leave that checked, or if you don't want to, you can always uncheck it. You can also add guidance from other organizations. So maybe and we haven't done this kind of legwork yet, but maybe that another institution has really great DMPTool guidance. So what you can do is just select that list, and then you get their guidance in addition to everyone else's. So lots of colleges have and institutions have their accounts and their DMP guidance in DMPTool. So if you're interested in Duke, or if you're interested in Carnegie Mellon, you can do that here and see what they have to say about their particular sections. Moving on, collaborators is fairly self-explanatory. This allows you to invite users to the project. So it is like a cloud-based, web-based tool. So it's built for collaboration. So if I'm working on a project with 5 other people, I can invite them all, and they can all make edits. And if possible, or read-only, and you can do that here with the collaborators as well. So now to do the actual sort of meat of the policy, actually writing the plan. So what they have done, and they updated it a week ago, so that's about how up to date they try to keep these new templates. This is based on the generic DMSP template that you can get from the NIH website. And what it does is it has the questions, it has the sort of guidance text that is included. It includes the guidance on the right. So here's the Weill Cornell guidance, which again just links out to the data type guidance on the actual website. So instead of putting all of this in a text box, we were like, we'll just make the link outs and make that kind of as clean as possible. The DMPTool guidance is here as well. And if we had selected other institutions, they would be showing up here as well. There's also a comment section. So if you're writing and you have questions, you can write comments to your collaborators at each kind of section break, which is, can be nice if you're working together and you have a couple options available to you. So the questions themselves, as I mentioned before, they ask the NIH questions. They do also provide example answers. So things that are basically just fill in the blank templates. If you have kind of a generic data workflow, you can more or less copy paste some of this, just change some of the words, and it allows you to effectively answer the questions that the NIH are asking. We also have sample examples on the library site as well that we'll be updating sort of with real world examples as we sort of get them and hear back. So it involves each of the sections that matches up with the NIH with, again, guidance and sample answers. And it just steps you through each section. And it gives you ideas. It lets you know kind of what's expected, what are some options for answering. And it again links out to NIH guidance as well. So if there are any issues that you might have with some of the language and the verbiage, you can look at the actual policy itself and try to hash that out as much as possible. So that is the gist of filling out and creating an actual data management plan in DMPTool. Like I said, at this stage, they've tried to make it as simple and seamless as possible, just by providing you a lot of guidance and examples. The one thing I will caution at this stage is that some of the ICs have additional requirements for what they want in your data management plan. So the NIMH, for example, has a separate data validation schedule that they want included in the DMSP. That's not included in a generic template like this. Further down the line, there might be IC specific templates that are available, but there's often going to be additional requirements based on the announcement itself, the award, the IC, anything that might be a little bit different from this generic template you need to be aware of. So just something to keep in mind about that. It also allows you to list research outputs if you want to, and this can be pretty much anything that you want. I don't know anyone who actually uses this actual section, but for internal bookkeeping purposes, you can include actual standards, a repository if not already included in your plan, and just keep track of it this way if you're curious about that. And it sort of generates like a non-technical like README file where you're listing out what you're generating, where it's going to go, and it's a little more detailed and long than the data management plan that the NIH wants would be, which is capped at 2 pages.
Oh, Drew, really quick,
Yeah.
we have a question.
Yes.
It says, so this is something the lab PI would generate, not individual lab investigators?
Yeah, so it would be 1 per project. So whoever's sort of going to be handling the sort of the bookkeeping for the project would be the one who would do this. So it could be a lab PI, it could be a manager, could be the person, if there's an individual person who's actually handling or going to be in charge of the data management and sharing sort of workflows, they could do this as well.
Thanks, Drew.
Yeah. Cool. So the finalize, it just asks you for a couple other sort of details just to make sure that you've kind of done everything. So you can set it private, organization, or public. So the public ones are the ones that are available on the public DMP site or link. Organization will just be when people log in, they'll be able to see it. Back under my dashboard, there was a couple Weill Cornell DMPs that had been made publicly or viewable at the organization level, and most people will probably opt to make theirs private, just because for privacy reasons. And maybe at some point further down the line, once a project is funded, you can go back in and mark it public if you want people to see it. We're not really concerned about the DMP IDs at the moment. That's relatively new. But if you do want to register, it's basically just a URI that links the data management plan to your ORCID ID. If that's something that you're interested in, there's steps that enable to do that and to link your ORCID record. If that's something that you have and are aware of and you're curious about kind of tying all of your digital stuff together, there's instructions on how to do that at the third-party applications page. And finally, there's the downloading portion of the program, which is basically just exporting what you have so that you can then upload it to the other forms section on your grant application. And there's no real need to change any of these things. If you want to change the font, I think 11 is what is the minimum recommended. And margins, you can tweak that a little bit to kind of get within the 2-page limit. But it's all kind of there and optional for you. You can also download it as a Word file, so that if you do need to add additional options or sections, you can do that sort of after the fact. And that is the very quick run through of using DMPTool to generate NIH data management and sharing plans. So are there any sort of questions about the DMP tool itself?
We got a question about, can you please show us what the options are for linking the data? Can you please show us what the options for linking the data storage are? There was a link in the right plan tab that they're referring to.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking about data storage?
Yes.
So we do have a couple of different options. There's the NIH sort of recommendations with their selecting a data repository. We do also have our own guidance. Let me just link to. 。 where we also kind of link out to the NIH plan, and then we also have additional guidance, both kind of for NIH folks, and we talk about wider here as well. So we'll just pop out to, whoops, that's not great. Broken link. So we'll talk out to this, the NIH version of the Selecting a Data repository, where they have a lot of options available. We also have a decent amount of options available in an additional website called Research Data Management, Retention, and Sharing. That also includes additional storage options and workflows that may work for you. But this initial NIH document is actually pretty helpful for trying to figure out where you're gonna share stuff.
There's a question about how does the plan created for the project link to the application itself? The example given is R01 to NIH.
Sure. So you would just download the DMP tool or the DMP from DMPTool, and then you would attach it to, I think it's the other forms section in, like in ERA Commons, when you're submitting your application. So it doesn't link directly to ERA. It's a download and upload, and that's one of the drawbacks of it being a third party.
Are there any other questions about the DMP tool or the policy itself, policy changes itself? I do see, I got a direct message about the link not working. If you're referring to the DMP tool application itself, just try typing in dmptool.org. I do see that it is working and Drew is on it right now. So it is functioning. I don't see that the site's having an issue. So I just urge you to try again, maybe refresh the page or use a different browser just to make sure that you are able to access it. Oh, we just got, what is the advantage of using this tool as opposed to just filling out the 2-page NIH template in Word?
There's not. It's just a different tool to tackle the same problem. So depending on how you have the Word template set up, depending on how you collaborate, whether it's on like a Google Doc or a Google Drive box or OneDrive, this is just an extra sort of platform that allows multiple people to access it all at once. And it has the guidance that is comes along for the ride. And I know a lot of people from the NSF sort of launch build their initial DMP tool or DMP plan inside of DMPTool. And then once they sort of have their general plan in place, a lot of times then they'll just do minor tweaks kind of in Word offline. So it's basically for the folks who see the template from the NIH, they're not entirely sure how to answer those questions. And this has sort of a step-by-step, here's what's expected. Here is some tools that are available to you, and here's some language that you can use. Sort of all in one bundle. But yeah, either way is good. Using the Word template or using the DMPTool templates, no matter how you it just depends on how you like to work, essentially.
Oh, we just got one in. The new DMP policy requires separate budget on application for costs related to DMP. If the lab is using existing internal resources, such as access to cloud storage and platform for data sharing, is there a tool or guideline that can help us project the additional costs and budget we should add to the application?
So the budget questions are outside of my range of expertise. If Sarah is on the call, Sarah Ben Mamar or Michaeli, do you have additional info on the budget side of things?
I know that ITS is working on giving exact estimate on how much you should put for each, depending on how much data you use. I don't think it's been published yet.
Right.
I can ask them to speed up a little bit.
So there is some feedback about what the NIH will allow as far as additional budget issues. So anything that's apart from this, I don't know if we have institutional guidance for the budget side of it yet. Does that sound correct, Michele?
Yeah. There is another question from Dr. Ross. No, you can pay the cost of IDC, but you can also ask for specific money for the storage of data.
Yes, storage alone is you have to sort of finesse it a little bit. Like just paying just like for storage space or like yeah, file share space is not valid, but putting it somewhere that makes it shareable, and if you need to hire people to de-identify data sets or to manage that, that's where you can pop that into the data management and sharing plan and the sort of overall workflow there.
We just got another question. I feel that the description of data type is quite vague. Could you please elaborate? Examples are all large data types like sequencing, fMRI imaging, etc. Are these the only kind of data considered here? How about traditional data, small data, and pardon me if I mispronounce, like qPCR, ELISA, etc.
Yeah, so I think it's vague on purpose because they don't want it to be too restrictive to what people are generating. Because listing everything that could possibly be generated in sort of a template form would be nuts. So it is just going to be basically whatever you're generating. Some people are generating data types like that. Some people are generating a single spreadsheet with 50 observations on it. So it's basically whatever you are generating during the course of your research. So it is vague and broad in general on purpose.
Is WCM's data repository service free?
So yes, using again, Michele or Sarah, feel free to jump in here. It's more of an archive than a repository, if that makes sense. So I assume you're talking about WIDR, the Wild Institutional Data Repository for Research. That is meant to be a storage place for data generated here at WILE, not necessarily for sharing data generated as a result of NIH funding.
So if you use WIDR, you basically comply with half of the NIH policy. You comply with the data retention part, but you don't comply with the sharing part.
Yeah, the management is yes, sharing no.
Yeah. So for the sharing, you have to find a different depository, one of the public repository, or probably if you use Lab Archive, probably Lab Archive can be used for sharing.
So yeah, it's more or less if other people can access it. So there's these, we don't have time to get into the whole thing, but there's these data principles called FAIR, findable, accessible, interoperable, reproducible, that the NIH wants all data generated using NIH funds to fall under that capacity. So it's difficult sometimes to find places to put that material that satisfies all of those things. And if you are working with human subject research, sometimes that's not going to be possible just due to privacy concerns and things like that. But these are all things that you talk about in your DMSP. So what you're generating and whether or not you're going to be sharing it or not. And if you're not sharing it, why, things like that are that is what you discuss in this document. So even if you are not sharing any data for whatever reason, you still have to create this document, include all of the information that you still would include if you were sharing it, but then you just discuss why you're not actually sharing that data.
Yeah. So Dr. Zimpin asked if we can provide links to data stored internally. No, data stored internally cannot be shared publicly, particularly the file share. And that Dr. Komanashki, sorry if I mispronounced your name, Yes, Lab Archive is a valid data repository according to NIH guidance. Data repository. So notice that there are is a difference between the repository and the sharing. If you comply with the Cornell data repository policies, then you comply also automatically for the NIH data repository policy. But then you have to have a sharing plan.
Michele, as a follow-up to Jonathan Zippin's comment, he wrote, so is geo acceptable, for example?
I'm sorry, I don't know what geo is. Can you maybe you can unmute in?
Yeah, if you want to put more details in the chat or a link even that we could take a look at while we have a few minutes, that would be great. Somebody did say geo is acceptable. A couple people are chiming in.
Yeah, Todd Evans said so geo is perfect. Yep.
Okay, perfect. We did get a question. What is the research domain for biomedical science? This is not an option on DMPTool. Are there minimum requirements that need to be addressed in DMP? Does DMPTool prompt to which are required and which are optional?
No. So in the actual plan itself, is that what we're talking about?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so no, it's just a generic kind of, it's just a generic template. It's expecting that there's going to be a response for every section. But if there are sections for whatever reason that you don't have a response to, you don't have to. And if you notice, one of the download options was to ignore unanswered questions. So you don't have to include everything. Again, this is just, and even the NIH template is not, it's not the required form that you submitted in. It's just the template that they're expecting it to be in. So it's wanting all of those things to be addressed as much as possible, but it is possible that you might not have a response for everything.
Perfect. The resource sharing plan already includes sharing the data. Can the same wording be used for the DMP?
So as long as it addresses all of those things. So if it addresses those 6 topics and sort of like the sub questions in front of it. I actually have an open question with one of the NIH groups about the resource sharing plan. Like, is that only for like model organisms and stuff now, or are we also still including the data stuff in the resource sharing plan? Or does the DMSP act as the data side, and so it doesn't have to be in the resource sharing plan? if that makes sense. I haven't heard back yet. If anyone else has heard back, that would be great information to know. But yeah, so as long as it addresses what needs to be addressed, you can use the same language.
Can it be made in a way that data types that cannot use NCBI related or other repositories to be archived here at WCM made available for those who request it each time? I feel that NIH to make us use a paid online service is unreasonable because the funding to cover the fee may not last forever.
Yeah. we sort of agree with that. So where is the data going to go that can't be put in one of the NCBI databases or one of the generalist repositories that are available on like our site and the NIH site? Where do those fall through the cracks? So you can put that into WIDER, the Wild Institutional Data Repository for research, as a last resort. Again, there's not a workflow for getting it out of that yet. So getting it out, making it available, is there a cost associated with it? Those are things that are being worked on currently. But yeah, so a lot of the funding isn't like you pay once to store in Dryad or something, for example. That doesn't last for forever. So if the money runs out and the project's over, what happens with that data? Those are all questions that need to be answered.
Michele, there's actually a follow-up to one of your comments about the DMP budget that ITS is trying to build some guidance on. A lot of people are submitting for the February 5th deadline next week. Do we have an interim helpline for advice of DMP-related budget questions?
Yeah, so there is a request form for help on DMP on the overall NIH policy. I don't know if I can put the link in the.
Yeah, if you have the link and you want to put in the chat, I'll also make sure to send it in the follow-up email that I give to everybody who registered. So if you can find that, that would be perfect.
Yeah,
Nikki.
one second. There is a form that you fill and then goes to the library. And then
Perfect.
we can help you. One second.
While you're looking for that, we have another question. Once the project is completed, should the plan be revised to reflect the actual output of the project, or knowing that projects don't always follow the plan, once the project is funded, does the plan become irrelevant?
Yeah, you can update the plan as it's sort of evolving. So you update it, you submit it to ERA. Now, what we don't know right yet is to what level of variation does an official sort of amendment have to be done? So if you just change a little bit, to keep it very vague, this is not helpful at all, I'm sorry. If you change it a little bit, of 2 words, just to be hyperbolic, do you have to submit an amendment to that? If you do a very subtle change to an RB protocol, do you have to submit an amendment? Or is it just kind of like bigger picture? Okay, now we're collecting this type of data. We're not putting it where we originally were going to be put it. Are those kind of like big, broad, general changes all that need to be uploaded to as an amendment? We're not sure about that. That's one of those things that's going to come out.
I think that's a conversation. The best person to answer is probably your program manager at the NIH, because if it's, they will tell you if it's important because it's a major change, or if it's not important because it's a minor change, or you can submit it during the progress report.
Yeah, so the progress reports and renewals, that would also be another place to put your new amended.
So Nancy's asking,
plan.
Yeah, we need to deposit Western blot data, PCR. Yes, you need to deposit all data, all the scientific data generated by the NIH. Drew, do you have the slides of what kind of data do you have to submit?
No, I don't have any slides up. I can look for it though. I know there's a listing on the NIH site as well, and our site, so I can poke around.
Yeah.
As a follow-up, somebody just asked, we deposit our Western blot, qPCR, and non-omics data in Mendeley. Is that okay?
So Mendeley data, I assume?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Mendeley is one of the Mendeley data, is one of the kind of like using preferred strong language. It's one of the like called out NIH generalist repositories that the NIH has said would kind of fulfills their desires.
Yeah, so
desirable.
Do you want to talk about the others like Figshare?
Sure. Yeah. Let me go to the NIH guidance just to get it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah. So there is a lot of other generalist repository. And I posted in the link. I posted in the chat. I'm just telling you so everybody knows the link for the form to ask help, both for the retention policy and for the DMP plan.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, so these are what are so-called generalist repositories that the NIH has identified. Again, this page is new in the last few days, so I don't know if they are doubling down on not officially recommending these particular repositories, but they are listed and available. So Mendeley data is one of them. The ones that we sort of see people use a lot that are freely available and relatively easy to use and straightforward to use. Figshare, Mendeley, and Zenodo are used very heavily. So if you have data that doesn't fit in one of the domain-specific NIH kind of supported and funded repositories, the generalist repositories listed here, again, one of these 3 will most likely work for you, just as another option to put your data.
Awesome. We have a few minutes left. We've gone through all the questions so far in the chat. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? Oh, how do we know which one of the options cost money? That's the question.
So there's not a, so there is, we're sort of jumping around a lot, but there's an organization called RA3 Data that's basically just a huge registry of data repos. And one of the filters you can search on is sort of upload cost and maintenance cost. And one of the things you can also look at is, if you have a particular repository, generalist repository that you're interested in, it breaks down a lot of the sort of characteristics of that repo. So you don't have to try to navigate the often confusing terms of the actual site itself. So this will typically tell you if there's any cost associated with it, what the licenses are, what the rules are, what the upload limits are, things like that. So it's super helpful. Kind of overwhelming if you're going in without looking at, for a repo specifically. But that's kind of why the NIH has recommended those, 10-ish generalist repos. And then if you want more information on them, you can go and look them up in their RA3 data record, which is quite nice.
As a follow-up, the person who asked that question is asking, so is that particular one that you've pulled up, is it free? They cannot see where it's specified in the data that you're showing?
Yes, it is free. Let me see where that would be. Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's free because it's paid for by CERN.
Yeah, it's definitely free. That used to be a field. I wonder if they've, RE3 Data has kind of finessed that field, because that's a tricky option for other repos, because sometimes there's no fee associated with it if you're doing under a certain certain size. Sometimes there's a fee if you do larger or for specific uses. But yeah, interesting. But yeah, Zenodo is free.
Yeah, so it is paid for by the European community, basically.
And I put the link for this website in the chat. I'll also make sure it's in the follow-up email so you can refer to it later, and use it if you need to look up some of the repositories that Drew's mentioned. Any other questions? I know we have like a minute left, and while I'm waiting to see if anybody's got any follow-up questions, for anybody who signed in late, we are recording this session, so you'll find an email from me later today with a copy of this session that you can watch whenever you need to. You can share it with colleagues, and you can also find some other details of the links that we discussed today. Oh, could you please include all? Yeah, exactly. I will definitely include all the links in the chat and that Drew has shown, so that you can refer to them, whenever you need to. And hopefully they'll be helpful in your DMP journey.
Yeah, so in addition to these things, we also have, just real quick, we have online office hours twice a week, 4 to 5 Tuesday afternoons, and Thursdays 9 to 10 in the morning. So if you ever have just like a real quick question you want to pop in and ask, we could take a look at sort of your specific case and see what's going on. I guess just one exception is tomorrow or this week on Thursday, because of SmartFest, we'll all be in the library at our annual sort of info fair. So if you have any questions that want to talk, kind of drop in person, we'll be there in the library all day on Thursday.
Awesome. And there's one last question that I think somebody answered in the chat. Does Mendeley allow containerized uploads? Like zip files, essentially.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Thank you to Drew and Michele. I know we had a ton of questions, and I appreciate you hanging on to answer everybody's, inquiries. And again, I'll be sending a follow-up email with all the information we talked about today. So have a great rest of the day, everyone. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.